So for this very special episode of Pirates of Finance, I brought in the big guns. Corey couldn't be here today, so I brought in our buddy Chris Abdul-Masia, who's much more handsome than Corey is, much smarter than Corey is, with much more experience than Corey. So we're getting the top tier. So maybe we'll never have Corey back after this one. But we wanted to bring Chris in because there was a very interesting Twitter Spaces yesterday that Chris got involved in. And Chris has an amazing background in two legendary firms where he was an options trader and even going way back an options market maker, et cetera. So Chris, kind of maybe you can lay the groundwork, like what happened in Twitter Spaces yesterday and what prompted you to have all these things that we could talk about today.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, thanks for having me on. And yeah, I'm clearly more handsome than Corey.
Yeah.
Okay. No,
more distinguished. That's what I'd go with.
More distinguished. Yeah. I'm a lot older, and that guy makes me feel very old, by the way. Yeah, Twitter Spaces. Yesterday, Quantian hosted a Twitter space that had it was a conversation about payment for order flow, and I think it was called Hunting Apes or something like that. And there was all the microstructure kind of people were in there. Lots of super smart people were in there. And as I was listening, there was a bit of that. There was a bit of that theme about whether these firms like Citadel cheat by having the intelligence from their or the data that comes from their Citadel Securities business get somehow moves over to the regular hedge fund business. And there, in other words, there's a sort of a lack of respect for the compliance that happens at these firms. And I felt like the need to chime in, because as a person that has had to sit in so many meetings and whose daily workflow over my career has been so infused with compliance that it seems extremely out of touch to me to think that there's any kind of impropriety happening around the way execution happens. So I chimed in with an example of if you are taking a show from a broker in an option, kind of what that workflow looks like. And so I'll rehash the example that I gave real quick. So what I described is, say the broker called, you're an upstairs trader at a desk. Broker comes to you, says, I want to buy 5,000 calls in XYZ stock. Let's say they're 40 delta calls, and you make an offer. The broker says, I'll take your offer. And now at that moment, first of all, the important thing here is everything that has happened here, that negotiation, them asking me for the offer, me giving them the price, they've already indicated to me their intention that they want to buy these calls. The fact that they've engaged me on a name at all has frozen me in the name. That means that I cannot go onto an execution platform and buy the stock. I can't go buy vol in that name because I know that the broker wants to buy vol. At this point, this is all private information. I am not allowed to act on it. So we agree to the deal. And remember, I cannot hedge right now. I cannot touch the stock in any way. Now, that broker then has to call his downstairs broker, his floor broker, and tell him, okay, we've agreed to this deal. Now go put the trade up. So that broker, that floor broker now has to approach the pit where that stock trades. Say it's on the CBOE. They approach the pit and they announce to the pit the intention to cross this trade. What does a cross trade mean? A cross trade means that the floor broker is holding the buy and the sell, the buy being the originating buy order that the broker called me with, and the sell being my share of that trade. So if I'm the only seller on the deal, it's going to be a buy order from the originator, a sell order from me, and that broker is going to cross that in the pit. Now, before they can cross it in the pit, they have to tell the crowd, the guys, the floor market makers, hey, we want to do this. The floor market makers have kind of last look or right of refusal, because they can say, you know what, actually, we like that too. We want to sell those options along with your upstairs solicited trader. We want to sell those options as well. Let us sell 20% of the deal. Now, at that point, I thought I was going to get to sell 5,000 options. Now the floor market makers are sort of blocking the deal and saying, hey, you got to give us 20% tribute or you cannot cross the trade here. So there's another bit of a negotiation there, because I can say, you know, screw that, I want the whole deal, take it to another floor. That may or may not work, because floor market makers oftentimes work for large firms that have presences on all the floors. So I sort of have to do this quick calculation of like, what are my odds of getting a better allocation on another floor, or just let these guys have their 20% here. And by the way, the floor market makers also did some of this arithmetic in their head, because if they asked for 50%, then I'm definitely going to take the order away. So there's been gamesmanship the entire time at this point. But let's just say that I'm fine being cut back 20% on my deal. The floor is happy getting their 20%. So at this point, everybody's lined up and the deal is at this point consummated. Say, okay, we can put this trade up. At that moment is very, very important. That is the time in which the trade has been announced. It is the time in which the deal has been recognized. It is verbally recognized that there was a trade, but it's before the time that the trade hits the tape. The trade has not been printed yet. So the announcement time, the time when it's all verbally recognized, is the moment at which people are allowed to hedge. Market makers can move the screens at that point. They can go out and buy vol. They can go out and buy the stock. So I'm going to be, me as the upstairs trader, I'm going to be in the broker's ear constantly. Am I announced? Am I announced? Am I announced? Okay. And all of this is because those are the rules. Up until that point, it was all private information, and I do not want to act on private information. The announcement is when the deal is public. So
that's why you're panicking, right, for that announcement, because you can have adverse selection or adverse moves in the interim where you're waiting for that announcement before you can start getting on your hedges. And talk to me about what those kind of things that can happen in that intervening period are.
Right. So let me talk about the important, why do I care so much about the announcement? Well, first of all, if there's more than one person on the deal, there's a race to hedge. So we might all go out and have to buy the stock to hedge the calls. We might all be out there trying to lift some other options in the name. So there's a race component to this. So nobody wants to be the second person or third person to find out that they were announced. That there's also you alluded to a very interesting dynamic that happens at that when the order hits the pit, the adverse selection piece. And we have to back up for a moment and we can put some to try to understand this. I agreed to sell call options to this broker upstairs. There is a little bit of a lag of time between me agreeing to that trade and that being presented to the floor. Now, what happened? Let's look at the two scenarios. That the stock usually is going to be in the same place by the time it hits the floor, so that's not interesting. But there's two other scenarios. What happens if the stock rallies in the time that it takes to get the order to the floor, and what happens if the stock sells off? Let's talk about the case where the stock sells off. So the customer wants to buy calls. I'm going to sell these calls, say at $3, but by the time the order hits the floor, the stock drops. That means all the screen offers have probably also dropped with the stock on the calls. So I agreed to sell the calls at $3, but now the screens are at $2.95. They're offered at $2.95. So the broker is going to have to tell me, listen, hey, Chris, are you willing to match the screen and lower your offer and sell these at $2.95? Or do you want me to quote clear screens? So let's say I agreed to sell 5,000 options at $3, but there's 500 contracts offered at 295. The broker can do is he can lift the 295s from the screen, give that to his customer, and then fill the balance of 4,500 options at $3 from me. There's a little bit of a concern there for him that he could lift the screen at 295 and then the screen could re-offer at 295. And then we kind of get into this cat and mouse game where the screen keeps filling in which case I may want to just lower my offer and sell the 295s because I know that that's a good sale. But the point is if the stock drops, my commitment to sell these calls has become more attractive to me. But what happens is that my volume gets cut back because the screens are going to get volume, or the pit might block the trade and say, screw that guy. We want to sell all of these at 295. Hell, we'll sell them at 290 because the stock has dropped. So I get a lesser allocation when the trade goes in my favor. Now look at the converse situation. The stock rallies in the time that it takes. Now I've already committed to the broker that I'm selling him these options at $3, but let's say the stock rallies and the calls go $3 bid. Well, now none of the floor market makers are going to want to break that trade up. They're like, screw that guy. Like he's hung on those. Let him sell his $3. And I'm going to get a full allocation every single time. So in the time it takes for the order to hit the floor, the committed trader upstairs who's providing liquidity to that order is in a very adverse situation. If the stock, if his trade goes in his favor, he's going to do a smaller allocation. And if it goes against him, he's getting filled on the full amount. So that's kind of a little inside baseball on what the execution of these orders looks like.
And then in that scenario you gave us, and we're talking about time and how much time has elapsed when all of this can be transpiring while you're waiting to get that announcement?
Yeah, it's on the order of seconds. If the broker might have, especially for a large live order that has a lot of delta in it, he's probably going to have his floor broker already standing in that pit by the time he's even talking to me. So the lag is fairly small, but you got to remember, like the floor market makers, they're a savvy bunch. They're trying to kind of, if there's any kind of hemming and hawing, or to them, time is to their advantage. For them, they want things to take as long as possible. So if they can delay the process in any way, it's a bit to their advantage, because if they have the last look option, so the longer amount of time they get to look at what the stock does before deciding what to do maximizes the value of their last look option. And they understand that. So they are, they're kind of okay getting into a bit of a negotiation about what their share should be. So, and there is pressure there, like there's interpersonal pressures there as well. Remember, if I do a lesser allocation, that broker gets paid less money, because how does that broker get paid? He gets paid from the originating bid, and he gets paid from me as well for showing him that flow. But floor market makers don't pay the broker. So the less of the original deal that gets done by the two parties he showed it to, the less money he gets paid. So there, and the people that are on the floor, they want to have good relationships with the brokers too, because in sort of any kind of daily business, this is all tit for tat. Like everything's an iterated tit for tat. So you are going to be dealing with these people on a regular basis. So although that it seems super adversarial, there is an element of people trying to cooperate to make sure that sort of like future business dealings go smoothly.
Yeah, because you're not playing. I mean, even though you're trying to get a finite best price, you're playing an infinite game, and you're going to have to constantly be working with these people. And there's going to be a time where you need to place something, and you need them to take the other side of that trade. And I wondered if you think about the people that maybe scoff at the idea of Chinese walls. I'm just thinking about the amount of gamesmanship that's going on in a few seconds. You don't really have time to even be telling another department at that firm like what's going on. That's the way I look at it. Is like there's just not enough time frame for you to be colluding in any sort of relationship that people think happens, if they don't know how the intimacies of these trade works.
Yeah, I that's an interesting point. I don't I I think if you wanted to be nefarious about it, you could, because remember, like you could have, first of all, that phone conversation I'm having with a broker, you could have that could be on an open line where everybody can hear it. And oftentimes that is the case because let's say the broker calls my desk. What if I'm in the bathroom? He's shouting over. We need to have a system where all the other guys on the desk can hear, guys or gals on the desk can hear that conversation come through, because we don't want to leave that broker kind of hanging where he's just shouting into the air. So typically there's a lot of redundancy as far as many people being able to see all the incoming flow or incoming conversations. It is normal. It's not abnormal for for sort of a more complicated negotiation that might be happening, that might involve something that doesn't have a lot of delta in it, say like a delta neutral trade or a large package trade, where it would be sometimes the negotiation between the broker could become kind of heated or very, very involved. And on the desk, it was not uncommon for you would hear another trader negotiating with a broker, and you would just pick up the line just to listen in, because you could hear your trader's side, but you might want to hear the broker's side. But I think that this is all, this kind of brings me to another interesting point. There's a lot of people are very, they like to talk a lot about options and the math and the theory and all that stuff. But honestly, this day-to-day, what I call like hand-to-hand combat, all the negotiation, that's actually the bulk of the job. I mean, a lot of yes, you need to be able to do all the other things, but the truth is all the technical parts about options are pretty well internalized within just a few years of being on the job. Like all options language is, or all thinking about options is feels like English to me. I mean, I can dream in options. It's all of that stuff is really, really simple, because the job is, once you're used to it, I mean, it's just reps. But it's really the negotiation that's happening every day that is the meat of the job. I mean, you're on the phone all day if you're trading voice, with these brokers and negotiating, and there's sort of there's kind of, and even a lot of that is very routine as well. But you do end up in these interesting situations. There's always, on any one deal, there could be an amount of money where it makes sense to try to, be a bit of a jerk and try to press a little bit and get a bigger allocation. Or we can think about the way an order arrives. Here I gave a very simple example where the broker approached me by saying, Chris, I want to buy 5,000 XYZ. Where's your offer? But that's just one way an order can arrive. The broker could have arrived with, hey, Chris, these are 5,000 of these options are going to trade $3. Do you care? What does that mean? How did he even get a $3 offer in the first place? What does that mean? So a lot of times, an originating customer, let's say you're a long short fund and you're bullish on XYZ stock, you might go to your prime broker or a bank and say, I want to buy 5,000 of these. Where you want to put me up? And the bank will commit its own capital to facilitate that trade. So the bank says, I'll sell you these 5,000 at $3. But the bank might not actually want that risk. Now the bank gets paid commission from that originating customer. So let's say that customer pays 2 cents a lot in commission. So that effective trade price from that bank's point of view is 302. Okay. That bank might want to lay the risk off. So they might say, hey, maybe I can find some other market maker that's willing to sell these at $3. And from the bank's point of view, it's pretty much a pure win because they don't even have to hold the risk. So what happens is that they give that order to the broker goes to the market maker, says, hey, look, the bank's going to sell these whether or not you're going to sell them. But do you actually care? Do you want to participate in this? So I get a look at that. I can sell that. If I sell it at $3, my effective price is something less than $3 because I'm paying so I'm selling at $3 plus I'm paying the broker's commission. So, we are getting to trade. Me and the bank are basically trading at different effective prices, right? But the order can come that way. From my point of view, sometimes the bank wants to keep half the trade. And they're like, no, they definitely want to sell half the deal, but they're willing to give half the deal up. And sometimes they might pretend that it's like that, but they really want you to sell the whole deal. So there's some gamesmanship there. Another way the order can come to you is, if I'm the first look, I'm the second look on the deal. First of all, you need to know which look you are. You have to know where you are in the pecking order. How many people have already seen and passed on the deal, and now you're getting a look at it, right? So let's say the order comes to me and the broker says, hey, look, I've got some placed at this price. It could be that he called up another market maker and the market maker said, hey, look, wherever you trade those things, I'll sell some. That but I'm going to set a small, but that market maker says, I'll sell 20% of your order wherever you trade them. What's happened is the price isn't set at that point. What that small market maker is doing is saying, I just want to participate on this deal because I think that this deal is going to go up at a good price, but they're not actually pricing the deal. So they might come to me and ask me to price the deal because I'll do the lion's share and say, hey, look, where do you want to sell these? But just so you know, wherever they trade, I got this other guy that's going to sell 20%. And sort of, I have a decision about like whether I want to play hardball with that and be like, F that guy. But again, these are sort of iterated games. And I can go on, man. I could pull so many examples out, but like I've got a really interesting kind of version of that game is let's say at $3, I have to split the trade with 3 other people. But what if I basically dissent in the prisoner's dilemma and I cut the market and I say, F all those guys. I'll sell these things at $2.95, but I want to do them all. Then I have to think here, is that ploy going to work? First of all, is that mathematically make sense for me to do that? Well, it depends. If the option is worth $2.80 and I get to do 4 times as much volume at $2.95, I make more money because I'm getting 4 times the amount. I'm getting way more edge, selling. So I want to cut the market there. But if that option's only worth $2.83, do I really want, or sorry, $2.93, do I really want to do that? So there's always some amount of, for a high enough amount of edge, you are willing to cut the market and cut everybody out and sell the option way cheaper. So you always have to decide, do I want to try to cut the market? Do I want to play nice and just do my share? Or if I cut the market, is the broker going to even not go back to the other traders and say, hey, this guy, I got one guy that cut the market and said he'll sell at $2.95. And then if he's going to offer those other people the chance to sell at $2.95, well, then my ploy really backfired because now we're all going to end up doing the same allocations at a worse price for us. So I basically shot myself in the foot. So I kind of have to be able to predict how the broker is going to handle that order, or handle that part of it. So this is sort of like the ins and outs of like every moment of the day it looks like this. It's not
That's
fucking Charm.
yeah. This is why I love talking to you about it, because it's like, it's so amazing. Nobody realizes what's going behind the scenes, right? Like everybody thinks like, yeah, if you said it's not Charm, it's like everybody thinks if you just know your options, great, get straightforward electronic trading. But this is behind all the gamesmanship behind the scenes, and it's much more psychological, right? And luckily you had that Navy SEALs training in poker theory and everything, because like you're almost saying, sometimes you want to play loose, sometimes you want to play tight. It depends on what seat you are, from the button. Like all of those things matter the same as in poker as they do in trading, right? It's almost like a perfect overlay or analogy. And so that's why I always love talking to you behind the scenes about this stuff. And you've been incredibly helpful to Corey and I throughout the years. And even better now, it's like now you get to be part of our pirate ship, because like to cross metaphors, you're like a Ronin, right? You're a samurai without a master now. You're retired, which means Corey and I get to annoy you more and more. So I think then from here, obviously we could talk about, after that trade gets announced, then how do you hedge? But like, let's save that for another episode. We're going to get you back on. For all of you that have enjoyed listening to Chris and his vast experience, make sure, comment below. Maybe we have Corey walk the plank and Chris is the captain now. But we'll get Chris back on as much as we can in the future. But once again, thanks for coming on. And yeah, that was very timely with what was going on in Twitter Spaces. And it's great to hear all that gamesmanship behind the scenes that goes on in just making a market on an option order.
Thank you very much for having me, Jason.
Now make sure you like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss one of these amazing episodes.